Hi guys, I'm Ahana and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is a video about mistakes. All the rookie mistakes I've made so that you don't have to. There are a couple of reasons that I'm filming this video. Firstly, startups are hard. And I want you to know that making mistakes is totally normal. Secondly, if you've made any of the same mistakes that I did and are in some kind of sticky situation, maybe hearing how I got through them will help you. And third, it's nice to reflect on my own mistakes and really think about what I learnt from them. I've made plenty of mistakes so far in my entrepreneurial journey, far too many for just one video. As such, this video will be focused on team-related mistakes that I've made. I'm thinking of making videos on some business mistakes and mindset mistakes as well, so comment down below if you're interested in hearing deep dives on those topics too. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The first team-related mistake I made was not having awkward conversations soon enough. Startups are a lot like dating. There's always that initial phase where you're kind of unsure about how interested the other person is, what their long-term plans are, and if they're really in this for the right reasons. Understanding everyone's commitment levels can be a bit confusing, and nobody likes having the talk. Sadly, it's one of those band-aids that just has to be ripped off, whether that's in dating or in startups. Turns into a dating advice channel. Not clearly communicating your own time commitments and long-term plans will only result in resentment and problems down the road. Although it can feel a little serious, especially if you're starting up just a side project with your friends, I would recommend maybe signing a confidentiality agreement or an NDA once you start working. A founder's agreement is probably also a wise thing to sign too. The founder's agreement in particular will force you to have conversations about your equity split, about your time commitments, and about your vesting schedules, which by extension infers your long-term commitments to this company. For those of you that are a little bit unsure about what a vesting schedule is, don't worry, I had no idea what it was before I started on my startup journey either. Essentially, what a vesting schedule is the amount of time it takes for you to fully own all of the shares that you've been allocated. For example, let's take a company with two founders, Founder A and Founder B. These founders have decided on an equal equity split. Let's say they issue 100 shares and they decide that each of them is entitled to 50 shares each. However, to get all 50 of those shares, both founders must stay in the company for a period of 4 years. Most shares will vest monthly, meaning that let's say Founder A wants to leave the company after 2 years. They will only receive 25 shares rather than the full 50 of which they were allocated at the beginning. The point of share vesting is to incentivize founders to stay in their business. But that's enough of the technical talk for now. Here are my 5 tips for having this awkward conversation. Number 1, bring this conversation up as early as possible. If thoughts like time commitments or long-term direction have even crossed your mind, it's definitely time to have the talk. Number 2, find a time when the whole team is present. For these sorts of conversations, you have to ensure that you're being transparent with everyone, so don't have one-off conversations with each team member before you reconvene as a group. Everything needs to be put on the table and in the open. Number 3, bring it up calmly and do your research. This isn't a pleasant conversation for anyone, so you must try to remain calm whilst initiating the topic with your team. There's also a good chance that your team might not understand why you need to sign documents or need a founder's agreement. So it's up to you to have done your research and be able to explain and articulate it to your team about why this is important, not just for you, but is in their own interests as well. Number 4, try to keep an open mind when having this conversation. People can be at different stages in their lives, and your co-founders might have different personal circumstances than you do, and it's really important to be respectful of that. It's much better to be able to plan for the future, even if it does mean that you're a little upset that one of your co-founders isn't as committed as you thought they were. The alternative is that down the road you're blindsided by their actions and you have no plan B. And number 5, read through all documents carefully. At the end of the day, this is a legally binding document, and you need to remember that. I know that legal language can be arduous to trawl through, but it has to be done. Most templates online are fairly good, but do make sure you actually read through them before signing anything. And on that point, let's talk about the second big team mistake I made. I made my own legal documents and changed way too many things on the templates that I used. There is a reason that it takes years to become a qualified lawyer. Let's put it this way. If you hurt your leg and needed a surgery, you'd go to a surgeon. You wouldn't do it yourself, or at least I hope you wouldn't do it yourself. Along the same vein, if you're in a sticky legal situation, please don't do it yourself. Please go and see a professional. Especially if your alternative is drafting a document with no legal baseline or template involved. And even if you're not in legal hot water and just need one of these documents, say a founder's agreement, don't write it from scratch. Use an online service to generate one for you. There are fantastic services available such as Seed Legals in the UK and Rocket Lawyer. I've linked them down below in the description, obviously not sponsored, although I wish I was, but we use these and they were incredibly helpful. Unfortunately, we only discovered these online services well after trying to make our own founders agreement for our previous company, Quill. And we actually showed this to someone that taught law to students, and they said it would make a fantastic exam question purely because of how ambiguous and confusingly it was written. And even though this might seem harmless, and in most cases is harmless, if things were to go sour between members of the founding team, then this is the document that would be brought into question. And for that reason, you need to make sure that any legally binding things you sign are absolutely watertight. And just to reiterate, you don't need to spend money on this, especially not in the beginning. Please don't procrastinate making a founder's agreement with the excuse that you can't afford a lawyer, because as I said, there is a lot of information online that can help you make these templates. And again, don't change too much on the templates once you get them. Most of them are pretty good out of the box, and the more you change it without any extra legal supervision, the more likely there are to be holes. The third mistake that I made was thinking about expanding the team too early on. And by the team, I mean the founding team. So at Hout, we're a 2-person founding team. It's just myself and my co-founder, Ben. Early on, we were seriously considering getting a third person on board to help speed up the tech development. It's likely that responsibilities aren't very clearly defined early on, and the amount of work you'll have to do to find a person, negotiate compensation, figure out what they should be doing, getting them up to speed with your entire business, and then mentoring them and making sure things are going okay is way more than if you just did these jobs yourself, especially at the beginning. At an early stage company, roles and responsibilities can be really fluid, and it's up to the founders to figure out scrappy solutions to all of the problems that they run into. As with anything, there are of course exceptions to this. For example, if you're a biotech company or a hard tech company, or even if there's just a very obvious skill gap in the team. But for most friends coming up with an idea in their basement, the team you have is probably just fine. And the fourth team mistake that I made was thinking about roles and responsibilities way too early on. It's worth noting that some teams actually have the opposite problem where they allocate things far too late and there's not enough accountability within the team. Given the initial lack of structure in a startup, it's difficult to pinpoint who exactly should be doing what. So it doesn't really make sense to allocate roles or titles too early on. However, if you leave it too long, as I mentioned, you might struggle with accountability and figuring out who needs to take responsibility for what needs to be done. It can also be a little off-putting to investors if you can't decide as a team who's doing what. But that's only a problem you need to worry about if you're thinking of fundraising. Even though I'd had some thoughts about the roles quite early on, Ben and I only came to an agreement on them about 3 to 4 months into working together, and even then, what we're doing is still changing, as are the roles we give ourselves. For example, Ben is CTO, but that doesn't mean that I don't code. And similarly, even though I'm CEO, Ben still helps me a lot on the business development side of things. There's no exact science to picking the right time to allocate these roles, but if it's something that's been in the back of your mind for a while and you've been working together for a couple of months, it might be time to have that conversation as well. Mistakes are normal, and you're bound to make a lot of them along the way. I certainly did. I know it's corny, but I've learned so much from the mistakes that I've made. Something that can set you apart from other founders is how you learn from the mistakes that you've made and how you respond to the problems that come your way. Even when you mess up and things feel really hard, Try to power through it and come up with a game plan. Alright, I could talk all day about all the mistakes I've made, but I'm gonna leave it here for now. I hope that sharing my own mistakes and how I worked through them is somewhat helpful for you. Comment down below if any of these mistakes that I've made resonated with you and how you worked through them when you faced them. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.